A Brush With is sponsored by Bloomberg Connects, the arts and culture app. Created by Bloomberg Philanthropies, Bloomberg Connects lets you access museums, galleries and cultural spaces around the world on demand. Download the app to access digital guides and explore a variety of content. Hello, I'm Ben Luke and welcome to a new series of A Brush With, the podcast from the Art newspaper in which I talk to artists about their influences, from writers to musicians, filmmakers and of course other artists, and the cultural experiences that have shaped their lives and work. And in this episode it's A Brush With Michaël Borremans, one of the most original painters working today. He marries a technical brilliance born of a careful study of the style and touch of the old masters with a sensibility and atmosphere that are completely his own. Though they depict figures, objects and environments, Michaël's paintings remain enigmatic, refusing to settle into easily readable narratives. They are full of uncanny detail and incident, which is all the more pronounced because of his sensual handling of the paint. Though he's a perceptive observer of people, things and space, Michaël says he paints culture as opposed to nature. When he makes a painting of a human face, for instance, he's not concerned with the mimetic process of portraiture, rather with a perception of the ineffable nature of human psychology, with what it might mean to be and to represent a human being today. Even though it's characterised by an often absurd playfulness, an abiding sense of isolation and disquiet permeates Michaël's work. Michaël was born in 1963 in Geraardsbergen in Belgium and lives between the city of Ghent and Ronse in the Belgian countryside. He studied at the St. Lucas Institute in Ghent, and in his studies he focused on mastering drawing and etching as well as on portrait photography, all elements that feature in his work in different ways today. It was not until the 1990s, when he was in his 30s, that he began to paint, after having spent much of his time observing and attempting to translate the techniques of historic painters. His first paintings of real note were made around the turn of the millennium and were remarkable in their strangeness and intensity. At this point, his source material was found images. In The Butter Sculptor from 2000, he depicts a male figure in a lab coat that appears to be shaping a slab of butter into a figurative form. He made a whole series of works in the following years involving figures in similarly ambiguous acts which suggest concentration or examination in specialist tasks, but thanks to the atmosphere he creates, imply potential threat. Many of the paintings of this period are made all the more compelling through deliberate omissions or unusual details. In The Advantage from 2002, for instance, a figure sits at a table with crossed arms, but by leaving out the description of his limbs, Michaël leaves a rectangular white void at the heart of the image, as if the man is somehow possessed by a box. It's an example of the surreal inventions and juxtapositions that continue to punctuate his work. Among the most dramatic of these uncanny tableaux are the many pictures in which figures appear as if occupying miniature or model landscapes, in groups and yet isolated, such as those from the Trickland series from 2002. Then there is a whole series of works where figures are described down to the waist, but then appear to be either submerged in a liquid or cut in two by a hard surface. Michaël harnesses his technique to allow for sharp jolts between reality and artifice, between high focus and poetic or absurd ambiguity. There was a shift in his practice around the mid-2000s when he began to make his own photographs as sources for his paintings. Often he asked his models to adopt poses redolent of figures in art history. A series of paintings called The Bodies from 2005 evokes the lying cadavers of Mantegna's Dead Christ and Manet's Dead Toreador. The Avoider from 2006 nods to Courbet's The Meeting. Photographing his own models allowed Michaël to experiment with props too. A whole group of paintings from the late 2000s reflects on the use of masks, which he's described as a metaphor for painting, a veneer of illusion that can be placed on the figure. He's also said that the mask is a metaphor for the fact that every painting is in essence a self-portrait, and the act of painting is both a process of sharing and obscuring the painter. The masks allude to a consistent cultural reference, the Commedia dell'arte, the historic Italian performance tradition, which included characters like the Harlequin and Columbina that have appeared regularly in his work, whether in the form of porcelain still-life objects or costumes donned by his his figures. Inevitably, this brings into play 18th century art historical references. Increasingly, in recent years, the paintings and photographs that they're based on make no secret of the fact that they're set within a studio, and yet their eeriness has not subsided. Often the figures are attired in strange costumes, again wearing masks or with their heads shrouded. There are ripples of associations between works across time too. In The Missile of 2013, a young girl in a yellow costume mysteriously holds a wooden rocket. In The Large Rocket of 2019, a figure stands forlornly dressed in a rocket-shaped tunic, and Little Missile of 2020 features a humble and delicately painted model of a bomb. Meanwhile, a discreet and distinctly macabre group of paintings, Fire from the Sun from 2018, features a group of toddlers apparently playing with bloody body parts. His latest group of paintings, called The Monkey and shown at David Zwirner in London in 2024, alludes to the singerie trend of the 18th century, in which monkeys took the form of humans in art and decorative objects, satirising the vanity of human society, and in Michaël's paintings, perhaps the role of the artist today. As ever, the mood and atmosphere of these paintings is multi-layered, and it's this with which I began our conversation. Why, I asked Michaël, is the tension between the absurd and the romantic such a productive one for him?
Well, these are two main elements that are present in the work, amongst others, of course, because it's a certain complexity in the work which I like, so you cannot define it too precisely.
But you're unafraid to enter into the realm of the romantic, in other words?
No, and that was a bold thing to do. I realized that even early in my career I was very much doing this already, with less absurd elements in it maybe. Basically, it has grown from two interests that I have developed since I was young, I think. On the one hand, it's beauty, and that's what I consider as a romantic element, and the pastoral and poetry that you can find in art or in imagery. And on the other hand, the questions of life, which leads you directly to the absurd and to the humor, because you cannot deal with life without seeing it as an absurd given, and it's important to have humor to deal with it. So maybe this combination of those two elements was not on purpose. Maybe it just grew naturally in my development as a human being. But these are two soft spots I have that I've been very well aware of. The first painters that convinced me to start painting, because, I started painting pretty late in my life. I was 34, 35 when I just started out, when I had to teach myself. And the first painter that came across and that convinced me was like Fragonard and Watteau. And I said, they're real draftsmen, but they know how to paint. Maybe that's a road I can try. And they inspired me somehow. And I came to romantic artists through drawing, because I wanted to be an excellent draftsman. I came to a level that I was close to these guys. I mean, in Western history of drawing, the French 18th century was a peak.
The absolute
if you see drawings of Watteau and Fragonard and their contemporaries, it's amazing. Of course, in content it was very light. It was escapism. It was girls on swings and court making and things like that. But it was the atmosphere they created in their paintings and their drawings was very special, were very appealing to me, and I want to master their technique. And that's how I came across them.
And in terms of how you approached painting, once you'd got that drawing down, as it were, did you usher it in subtly? Was there a lot of making oil sketches and so on before you got onto big canvases and larger size works?
At first I made very little studies on wooden panels, which I found, or broken furniture. Just tryouts, and they were almost abstract. I just wanted to place one color next to another and see how it was becoming interesting or how it moved me. And the funny thing is that the first paintings were quite abstract, always based on something visual, but I made an abstraction of it, a bit like Cézanne did, or later the modern artists. And that was a good way for me to approach it, because you're not only dealing with form, but also with color, which was for me a very big change. But the main thing, what I discovered about painting, because I was drawing, and you don't get much attention with drawing in the art market. I mean, if you're only doing that, because it's a very silent medium, really. And showing a painting or having a painting on a wall, it's a totally different thing.
Right.
I mean, it generates much more attention for some strange reasons. And I said, oh, maybe I have to paint, you know.
Right.
That's how it started. A bit of a strategic decision also.
Absolutely. But I would say there's still a significant amount of abstraction even now in your work. There are moments where you feel that you deliberately leave areas of the canvas much less finished than others, and you really feel that it's almost like you're letting the paint take over in a way.
Yeah, I want to show that it's a painting. That's very important. It's just a layer of skin on a canvas, you know. It's an illusion. So I just want to point out that you're looking at a painting, and the painting is a non-transparent medium. You see the painting, you see an image, but you also see the painting just as much. Whereas with film or with a photograph, you forget the medium. You look at the content only. So that is a very conceptual element, basically. And abstract in the literal sense, maybe, here and there. But I think the work is more abstract in its content, because it's not dealing with subjects as painting traditionally does. I try to relate to the subconscious, but that also comes from the surrealists, of course. That was also an influence. And that's where the absurd comes from. The absurd largely also came from England, from Monty Python, of course, which I grew up with. And they were a great inspiration, I have to say. Not only them, but also some French comic books and these magazines like Pilote or Harakiri. Or the Chained Duck or something it was called. I don't know. I was reading all this stuff when I was a teenager.
Right. And it's the interesting thing is that there are points where it does get close to out and out humour, not just absurdity. You can have a beautifully painted image of a man wearing an absurd bonnet, and it can actually almost make you laugh. Is that reaction a valid reaction to your work? Do you court
it questions the subject.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nihilistic, really, because it's a traditional portrait, but I always give it a twist where you see, as a viewer, you will always ask the question, why did he do this? And so you cannot but question the painting or question the motives of the painter. And that's good, because otherwise you will always see a painting or a visual as an illustration, because we are in our society very much conditioned to do that, so there's nothing wrong with that. But I just want to add something to the painting which really stands out, that, this is not an illustration, this is a presence, this is a statement, something. Or sometimes the statement is not a statement, but just feels like it, or sometimes it's just a very absurd proposal manifestation, really, which really makes no sense sometimes.
Well, that's it. I mean, but what I love about the paintings is that, yes, it makes no sense, but you almost give us a riddle to unwind.
It's not a riddle to unwind. It's just an invitation to look at the painting as a painting and as a presence with of course, our cultural background, because it always relates clearly to elements of our Western culture. So it resonates with history. And that's very important in the work, because you cannot make new work. The building stones are there. It's just the way you approach it and you reflect on it that can be different.
Right.
And that can be very personal.
Yeah.
What I like about artists is their attitude, how in dealing with this. And that goes for musicians and writers, whatever. It's all about attitude, really.
Yeah. It seems to me that the absurd elements are a really crucial factor in doing something which I think you phrased very well when you said that you want to paint humanity, not a human being. Yeah. That seems to me a crucial factor.
Yeah, well, it's a bit generalizing, of course, but my goal is to show humanity in an implicit way, so that you can not see it but feel it, and show what we are, our identity, because we are always trying to find out what our identity is. And it's a very complex given that always changes. And that's what an artist does. I mean, that's what Bruegel does, and that's what Bosch does, and that's what Goya did, you know. Goya also being a romantic artist, but very different than Watteau. Right? but he's been a huge inspiration for me, you know.
Absolutely.
Because he made transformations in the work. He made statements. He was very modern, of course. We all know that. And
interestingly, seems more modern than so many artists before or after him.
Yeah. Although he was already living in times that things were really changing towards the Industrial Revolution. He was at the birth of that almost. But he was a very, very good witness of its time. Just like Michel Houellebecq is in writing now.
Right.
He really points out what is happening today, how hard it is
right.
to accept, but it's really true.
Right. And do you feel any responsibility to do anything like that yourself? Do you hold yourself to be a witness of our time and in some way?
Well, I don't do it on purpose, of course, because I'm a very intuitive person and I do what I feel I should do. But later analyzing it, you might think something of that kind in a much lighter way, of course, the light version. I'm a bit of a heavy brain and a heavy heart, and I try to escape that in my art to be light-footed, also dealing with serious matters. And in my art, sometimes I manage to do that. My art is also partly a way to deal with myself, which goes for many artists, of course.
But can it be as deliberate as that? Can you actually say to yourself, I need some lightness in this painting, and what am I going to do to bring that lightness in?
Still, some works are very dark still.
Yeah.
but always with a funny twist.
Yeah.
Or I try to do that. But I want to cultivate this attitude, and then it will come in the work eventually. I'm still working on it. Like, I don't want to work too much. So for years already, I try to work only in the morning. I haven't achieved it yet. I have no discipline, or I'm too chaotic maybe. And my ideal is to get up fairly early, and then I slowly start my day. I do my usual routines of the morning, some workout before breakfast, and then a shower, and then light breakfast with stewed fruit and herbs, and then I would ideally go to work and have another breakfast around 10 with coffee, the more traditional breakfast, and then I would work 2 more hours, and then I would go out for lunch, have a long lunch with a lot of wine, and then have a nap, and then start the evening with an aperitif. So that's I could do it. I mean, but I haven't managed yet. I don't know why.
The paintings keep drawing you back in, right?
But sometimes you start a painting and you can not stop at a certain hour, or sometimes you're in the studio in the morning and you don't dare to start with it. You think it over. Maybe I should do it, or oh no, maybe I should have done it yesterday. Maybe next week. I want to be hungry for that painting to start it. I'm not going to do it now. I might have another sharpness tomorrow, maybe next week. So I spend a lot of time just overthinking things, too much sometimes. So time passes in the morning, and then it's lunchtime already. I haven't done anything yet, and then I feel guilty, and I feel like I should work in the afternoon. But I'm less sharp even, and then I'm sorry that I worked that afternoon, and then tomorrow is another day. I'm going to give it another shot.
Back to start it all over again. Yeah.
But it really consumes me, the whole thing, of course, and sometimes too much. But because I think I would be better if I would be. On the one hand, the chaos works for me, but on the other hand, it would make my life more pleasant if I would have some more discipline, maybe. But I keep on trying. I will get there.
But of course, you're not going to let your practice slip. So you'd have to meet your own standards.
No, but I should do my thinking in the afternoon and the real work, the active work in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe I should develop a special studio where the light is only good in the morning. Like when I was in LA last winter, I was 3 months in LA, and I improvised a little studio in the guest room of the house where I was. I worked there only in the morning because at 11:30 the sun came in, burning hot sun on my working table. I couldn't work there anymore. So, and then I had to. So circumstances forced me to have leisure time in the afternoon.
Right.
And go for a swim.
So it is possible. Talking about this sort of difference between ideas of humanity versus a depiction of a human being, it seems to me one of the ways in which you do that is the people you depict never meet our gaze. Or rarely, I can't remember.
But that's very simple. I mean, if they meet our gaze, you get a portrait. Then you look into the eyes, which are supposed to be the mirror of the soul, and then you're into this cliche, which is, for me, I'm convinced this kind of painting is totally dead. It makes no sense anymore.
Right.
Painting has lost or is freed from all his documentary value it was used for before, and is a free medium now. So it becomes more interesting, but you can charge it differently. And That's what's so challenging, even within this old medium.
So you find yourself having to hit against those kind of traditions that you're talking about.
Yeah, but the traditions are concepts. They're conceptual things about painting. I mean, there was the subject. You see it in liturgic painting. They all had the same subjects to paint from the Bible. And artists excelled in it and others not because of talent. And that was the frame where they had to work in, which was a huge limitation, but also had its advantages, of course. If you have to paint the Holy Mother, every painter has done it, but you have to stand out, you know. It's a big challenge, and some did, you know.
Yeah.
If you're in a museum and there's one Goya, it's the only thing you see.
Yeah.
Everything else drops from the wall.
So let's move on to the questions that we ask all our guests. Who was the first artist whose work you loved?
I remember that I really loved the reconversion of St. Paul of Caravaggio.
Yeah.
I saw it in a book, so cinematographic, this painting. And I couldn't keep my eyes off it. Also, his Narcissus was in that same book. It was so magical. You know?
Was it cinematic quality that you just referred to? Were you coming at it having been already kind of immersed in film?
I was
and
totally
so on?
enchanted by these images.
Yeah.
I couldn't say why, but they moved me a lot. And I couldn't stop looking at them. I also had to go back. What is this?
I know that when you were very young, you said that when you were in church, you would look at images of saints.
Yeah, but they were not such good paintings. They were 19th century paintings.
But you knew even then, I want to do that. I want to try that sort of thing.
I found the conditions of a painting fascinating because I was looking at the paintings and it fired up my imagination because I was a child. I was 5 or 6 when it started. And then when you're in church, you're bored, of course, and your imagination starts to work and you see these paintings. And I imagined going up to the painting and it was like Narnia and I could walk into that painting and to that world. And that was what I loved doing because I was daydreaming. I was a great daydreamer. And they always tried to restrict that in school. I was punished. Every day I was punished because I was not paying attention to the class. I was in my mind thinking about beautiful things which were much more interesting. So they should have encouraged me.
Right. And did you get any encouragement in the art room? Were you able to go and study art? Were your art teachers allowing you?
Yeah, I felt much more at home there.
Yeah.
Of course.
And you were drawing from a child, right? And just kept going, is that right?
I just kept going, yeah. I never quit drawing. I wanted to be a comic strip author. Mm-hmm. And I tried it until I was 15, 16. And I said, I don't have the discipline. Because you have to maintain a style. My style was always changing. Which is normal, maybe. But it was a too narrow frame for me. And the thing that made me see that was 17, I think. I saw a show of the etchings in the Ghent Museum of all the series of etchings of Goya. And I realized comic strips, that's for losers. This is the shit.
I mean, they must have been, for somebody who was immersed in comic strips and drawing, the most extraordinary revelation.
I thought this guy doesn't need text balloons. And it's so powerful. It was choking me, especially these cruel disasters that I get. But also the capriccios showed so much fantasy with the witches flying and everything. Oh, it was so good. I remember it as the day of yesterday. I had no money. I saved to buy the catalog. I was starving myself. I needed that catalog.
That's amazing. And so would you literally pore over that catalogue and would you make drawings from it? Was it too sophisticated in those times?
Well, later when I started etching, I copied a couple of etchings, which teach me a lot, of course, if you copy something like that. His way of working with light and shadow in these etchings is also extraordinary.
Absolutely remarkable.
And very inspirational.
I mean, you've already said that Goya remains an important figure to you today, but which historical artist do you turn to the most today?
Must also be Goya, I think. He was a very complete artist. He had many different aspects that are appealing to me. I mean, when we talk about technique or tenderness or psychology, then Velázquez is the man, you know?
Yeah.
He was a genius. But there's very little drawings of him.
Well, that's it. I mean,
2 or 3, I think.
I always hope,
and they look good.
Yeah, one always hopes that somewhere in some Spanish royal residence there's a vault which somebody's going to discover.
Chest full of work.
You've talked about the portrait of Felipe Prospero, who was the ill-fated son of Felipe IV. And you said that you think that's among the most beautiful paintings in the world.
Velázquez really showed this empathy for the whole situation in that. It's just a portrait, but you feel it. He makes it feel. It's very implicit that it's there. You see all the amulets hanging around the boy, and you see the look in his eye and the tenderness that you can feel. How Velázquez felt about the situation. It was very sad, of course.
And there's the tragic dog with the watery eyes.
The dog that looks so sad, and which is also a symbol, of course, of faith. Mm-hmm. It's a horrible work, but it's very beautiful.
He was great at making amazingly complex psychological works within a kind of very restricted zone.
Yeah, they're just portraits.
Yeah,
he gave it totally different dimension.
I know that you were self-taught, as you said, in terms of your painting. Was it literally looking at paintings by Velázquez and others that you learned about layering, you learned about opacity and transparency and so on?
Yeah, I thought I can only look at the masters and hope they can teach me something. You should look at the... But I've been ambitious. Also in my drawing, technically, I was very ambitious. I want to excel totally. So I invested a lot of time and attention on it. So, and for me, Velázquez was technically the most sophisticated painter because he was a master of suggestion. He painted in a very, very loose and modern way. I mean, I compare it sometimes when you look at his paintings from close up. It's like John Coltrane in music. It's so wild and beautiful, and everything is right and oh yeah, you cannot stop looking at it.
And you can have that incredible revelation where you're like right up close to it, and the surface is so abstract, rough. So, and then you stand back, and somehow it coalesces into a physical material.
He might have been short-sighted because it helps. I'm short-sighted too. When I don't wear my glasses, I'm a better painter because I know how to handle the suggestion element better. Because you don't lose yourself in unimportant details because you don't see them anymore. You just see the tone and the accent, which stands out. And that's the most important when you paint. And it's said that Velázquez used very long sticks on his brushes because he wanted to see the painting. If you're close up, you don't see what you're doing. He wanted to see how it worked in the whole of the composition.
Yeah, amazing. It's a really interesting point. I wanted to talk about Chardin, because you have this exhibition called The Monkey, which is opening at David Zwirner, and it includes a figure of a monkey, and it seems like it's another of your porcelain figures. Is that right?
Well, the model was a porcelain monkey, which I found at an auction, together with his companions, all musicians. They were like a fanfare or a musical group, but I only painted the drum player because his face was free from instruments.
Right.
And from hats, the other ones had funny hats and things like that. And
but it's a direct reference to Chardin's portrait, which was part of that whole tradition of painting people as monkeys.
I always wanted to paint like an artificial monkey. When I was in Los Angeles, I hired Michelle Martini. She's a very good, famous costume designer, and she helps in films and so on. And she found me some monkey costumes, but none of them was like the right one for me. So I kept on looking. By accident, I found these porcelain monkeys. I said, they might do the job. And so I only wanted to add one monkey because the show consists of all portraits. Mm-hmm. And I want to have one monkey amongst the human portraits. But I got carried away. I painted 5.
Right. And the Chardin reference is he's effectively a self-portrait as a monkey.
Yeah, but that was an idea I had for a while, that I should do a version on that. Because Chardin is another painter which I find very fascinating. He was also a Rococo painter from Rococo period, and he painted genre scenes and small household scenes and still lifes, very simple stuff, like a lot of painters did. And for some strange reason, he made a universe out of his still lifes. I mean, the whole 18th century is reflected in it, and the philosophy of it and everything. And that's an amazing achievement. Yeah. I don't know if he did this or he tried this on purpose. Also, the work is very meditative at the same time. I mean, his best work. But he must have felt it, because his favorite works of mine are the several House of Cards works. Because you see the boy with the House of Cards, the one that's in National Gallery, for instance. You see it, he's reminiscing or meditating or thinking about the symbolism of the House of Cards.
And one of the things about Chardin is, it seems to me, he's found a route into the 21st century,
Absolutely,
if you like.
yeah.
Unlike many artists of that period who were wonderful technicians and great artists in their own way, for some reason Chardin's, the simplicity that you mentioned, somehow carries him right into our age, and it's transportive, I think.
Yeah, but I think it's the meditative quality that his work has to depict something very mundane and simple and give it a universal quality, as if it's something extraordinary. And that's what appeals to us, I think, from our times, from our perspective. It's great poetry, really, to do that, to paint a brioche. You would never look at a brioche the way you look at a brioche in Chardin's work.
Focusing on that monkey painting, it seems to me you're saying something about the nature of painting and the nature of the painter, in a way. The painter as a kind of performer. Would that be the correct reading?
Yeah, but that was the idea, that it would be some kind of a metaphorical self-portrait, because I would never paint myself. It would not subscribe my point of view in painting, but doing it via this bypass. It's also very universal. Yeah. Because artists are seen as a special species sometimes, and some artists answer to that and do crazy things and act like the village fool or whatever. Some of my colleagues are very strong at doing that. Otherwise are very sober and simple. But a lot of them act like some clowns. So, and in a way you are, because people want to see your studio, they want to see you at work. And for me, it's not relevant, of course. But if you're successful, of course, there's a lot of fuss about it, a lot of excitement, which is, of course, good for self-confidence for an artist sometimes. But for me, it's about the work. I mean, the persona of the artist is not so important. So it's a bit of a critique on that also.
Which contemporary artist do you most admire?
I like crazy contemporary art. I like Olaf Breunig.
Ah, right, okay.
I like Roman Zwirner with the explosions and so on. I like every artist that does things that surprise me, or that are a bit punkish or rock and roll. Because part of me is like that, but I've chosen to develop another part of me as an artist. Because I'm also a failure. I mean, I was meant to be a rock musician, you know, and that totally failed. You know? But
work in a way, almost in an almost diametrically opposed way to you. They have your spirit, innate spirit.
I understand them very well. I have great sympathy for their courage and their investment. I mean, work like that it's daring and investing. I think my work is daring too, because I paint in a romantic way. In these times, it becomes to be kind of accepted, but it was very misperceived at first.
Right.
But the definition in my works was not there yet either. I was not on the right track yet completely. But now I have found a more interesting balance, finally. It took me so much years, you know. I think it will develop the work even better. Otherwise, I will get depressed if it doesn't.
I see what you mean, in the sense that when I think of those paintings of the little naked children playing with what seem to be body parts.
Yeah, that's rock and roll. You know?
Yeah, there's an anarchism in that.
Yeah, there's a suggestion of cannibalism even. It's a lot about play, but the ingredients, the things they're playing with, are not things you usually play with.
But there's a wonderful...
I had great fun making this painting.
Well, I was going to say that, because on the one hand, they're extremely tender. The handling is supremely tender.
I wanted to have this contrast, of course, between the sophistication and the way the paint is lays itself so nicely, the way it is rendered and the content.
That's one of those sort of productive tensions that I was talking about.
That's the Chapman in me, you know. So to say.
Yeah,
I'm a great fan of them too. I mean, their best work.
Yeah. Again, there's that sort. You mentioned a sort of punkishness, and there's definitely a punkishness in the Chapman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like Blur also. You know.
Right.
But there's so many things I like, of course. I even like Taylor Swift. I like her latest song, Fortnite. It's a beautiful melody, really, like in a slow rhythm. Beautiful. You could play it on a piano like it's a small Chopin little piece, you know.
A Brush With is sponsored by Bloomberg Connects, the arts and culture app. The free app offers access to more than 430 cultural organisations through a single download, with new guides being added regularly. They include the Dali Museum in St. Petersburg in Florida and the National Gallery in London. Among the guides on the app are several museums in the US that have shown or collected the work of Michaël Borremans, from the Williams College Museum of Art in Williamstown, Massachusetts, to the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Denver, Colorado. If you download Bloomberg Connects, you will find that the guide to the MCA Denver includes in-depth features on its current shows, including audio and video content on A Hand in Nature, an exhibition by the Los Angeles-based Colombian-born artist Gala Porras Kim. She introduces the show and explores individual works in depth in a series of audio descriptions. To explore digital guides to all the partnering institutions, download the app today. It's available from the App Store and Google Play, and you can keep up to date by following Bloomberg Connects on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. What do you have pinned to the studio wall? We're actually sitting in your library right now.
That's why the acoustics are so good.
Exactly. It is a glorious space, I have to say. And I can see, just distantly, I can see a couple of Velázquez postcards.
One fell down. Someone must have touched it. Now they're in the right order.
Okay. So, you've got 3 portraits of the Infanta, the famous Infanta, who's actually the figure that's at the heart of Las Meninas, but these are those individual portraits of her, Margarita.
Different ages.
Yeah, and I can see also you got a Leonardo, the lady with the ermine there too. Is it important to you to have these things around you, to consult them, to just have their spirit, if you like, around you?
No, these are just paintings I like. I just have them on the wall, just like people have things on the wall. I'm not different than other people. I like beautiful things in my surrounding, but I don't mind looking at them the whole day.
But they're in the library space, interestingly, not downstairs in your studio, which is very sparse on the walls.
Yeah, distract me. Here it's a bit more cozy, and it's allowed to have some postcards here.
So you wouldn't have a Leonardo or Velázquez on the wall downstairs because it's just
its presence would distract me, of course.
Yeah,
especially if it was a real one. Which can only be in my imagination, of course.
Yeah.
Recently I have purchased a painting, landscape, 17th century, from Jacob van Ruisdael.
Oh, wow, how amazing.
One of the greatest landscape painters ever.
Right.
You can buy these things on auction, just like that. I was surprised.
Yeah, I'm amazed too. So
yes,
it's a small scale landscape?
It's a small one, but it's stunning. It's beautiful.
And that's not here, that's at your home?
It's in the bank in the... It's in the safe. I go and look at it from time to time.
Right.
Beautiful moments.
Yeah.
I'll have it somewhere, but I haven't decided where yet. And maybe I can lend it to a museum. But these things are not popular right now. That's why they're affordable. Lucky me.
Lucky you. Which museum or gallery do you visit the most?
I don't tend to visit museums or gallery of art too much. I do sometimes, but I can be inspired by anything. Art can inspire me, of course. Paintings can inspire me. People can inspire me. But when I go to museums, I go to all museums except art museums. I go to science museums, history museums. Because I find it more inspiring.
Yeah.
If you go to a museum of contemporary art, you see all things you have seen before already. There's another Donald Judd. Nice, of course. There's a Gerhard Richter. So most museums of modern art are sometimes a bit boring, really.
But there was a series of works that you made of kind of like scientific apparatuses, which were in that same exhibition with the toddlers playing with body parts.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that they emerged from some kind of study of scientific apparatus from a book or from a museum or something.
Yeah, I lent them from the Scientific Museum of the University of Ghent. It wasn't my idea, really. It was my girlfriend at the time. She thought it might be a good idea to paint machines. I said, what a good idea. So I just did it. So it was a good suggestion. They don't sell. Nobody's interested.
That's interesting. People want your images of people.
Yeah, or even a dead chicken, or machines are maybe too technical, too dead. Other works, even still lifes, that they have a connection with culture. There's always a part of familiarity in the work, and it's attractive maybe to some people.
Very interesting. Which cultural experience changed the way you see the world?
I cannot make one example because it comes from everywhere and mostly unexpected. I'm not chasing it. If I go to a museum, I'm chasing it, like a hungry wolf. I mean, something that inspires me.
You need a stimulus sort of thing.
Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. Sometimes I walk in the street and I see kids playing and they have their coats. It got warm. They have their coats on little poles on the side of the sea. So all the little poles became like little monsters. I mean, you have to be open to these things. I took pictures of it. I never done anything with it, but it was a great view. But that's also a cultural experience. It can be very simple or mundane.
And would you go out and seek those? As you say, it's things that happen to you, but will you say, I need to escape the studio and I need to go and see other things now?
Well, it's true. Sometimes when I've been working too much in the studio, I have to go out and about and walk. And mostly I go to other countries, but sometimes I walk here in Ghent. And then I discover things, I see things. A couple of years ago, so 2 black young guys with yellow hair and a lot of chains around them. They were very young. I didn't dare to talk to them. They would think I'm a weirdo or something. And then I just moved on. And then I said, Michael, you have to do everything for your work. You go back, I said to myself, go back, talk to these guys, ask them. And they were at first very suspicious. And then I had to show them my phone, my work on Google. And then okay, they said, how much does it pay? That's the only thing they were interested in. I made a great series of them. They were dancing to 50s rock and roll music because they were rappers.
Right.
That's the only music they knew. And they had to dance to music which was strange for them. So as a performance, it was also really good already.
Amazing.
I didn't film it really. 16 dances came out of that.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay.
And that was just from deciding. I was working in another studio in a former chapel and had to go home. It's a long walk. And I said, I should walk. Maybe I see some things. And I did.
Which writers or poets do you return to the most?
I've been reading a lot when I was younger. I don't read so much anymore. Maybe I have become blasé. So I don't return. But the one writer which is in content and his style so great, I never mind reading it, is Nabokov.
Ah, right.
He has such a great style and such a strange humor, and it's all about attitude, as I said. So he has an attitude.
Yeah. He's also a real painter's writer, it seems to me.
Maybe he is, yeah. Because, it's easy to visualize the situations that he writes about.
He was a synesthete. So
what?
He had synesthesia. So different colours represented different sounds of words. He wrote so beautifully about this, actually.
Yeah.
I think that accounts for how visual he is as a writer, actually.
Yeah.
You know, those beautiful scenes and so perfectly described.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that's exactly what you're doing with your brush. You know, it's an incredible...
I know, but he's sometimes close to cynical and he's a pervert also. But he's so stylish. He's, of course, from another era. He wouldn't survive today. I don't know. Maybe he would adapt, of course. and I've been writing George Sebald, things like that. I liked Witold Gombrowicz. Mm-hmm. He was really crazy. I liked it. I felt like I'm not the only one. but he must have had a real psychological problems, I think.
And Sebald is obviously, is another painter's or artist's
Yeah.
writer. You know.
He goes from one thing to another. I like that style. And he refers to photography and to all kinds of things. But he's not a writer that's easy to reread. You read the first time, it's nice, but if you reread it, it becomes a bit dull. It's exciting first time, of course.
Right. Now, you've already mentioned music. So which music or other audio do you listen to while you're in the studio?
I never listen to music in the studio because I work in silence with daylight, like in medieval times. It's the best thing. Daylight is unrepressible for the simple reason that it's an element, it's breathing, it's living. and it's changing all the time. No lamp can do that in that way. And you're depending on it. I mean, if it gets too dark, it starts to rain, you cannot paint.
How does that affect your flow?
So you go with nature.
Yeah.
No, you accept that because it's nature. It's a bigger force than you. Be humble. It's for a reason, I think.
That's fascinating.
It's such a beautiful element.
Yeah.
I'm so open for it.
Even if you don't listen to music while you're working, I do know that there is a separate part of your studio because you just showed it to me, which has musical instruments.
When I take a break, I make music myself.
Yeah.
There's a ritual I do when I enter the studio. The first thing I do is play some music. And one day you're better than the other day. It's like when you play tennis or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's the same with painting. And when I play well, I mostly paint well too. Right. And it gives me confidence.
I was going to ask that. Can you go in your music space, hammer out something on the guitar or on the drums or whatever, and then come back to painting and somehow that sort of, there's a sort of continuity?
It gives me good energy. And when I play well, then I'm confident that when I don't play well, then I don't dare to start painting sometimes. I don't have the good focus yet.
I've read that it takes you a long time to complete works and sometimes you will go...
Not always.
Right.
No, some works takes months and months, and other works I take 1 or 2 days, if I'm lucky. But then I'm very lucky.
Right.
You make no mistakes on your parcours in the process. But I work in different techniques also. I mean, sometimes you work al fresco, and then it can happen. You can make a painting in 3 hours. It happened to me in my career maybe 3 times.
So tell us what that feels like when that happens.
Oh, it's victorious. Yeah, you're walking on clouds when this happens, but especially when it's a good work. Sometimes you're really on a roll and you start the work. I'm going to do this today, maybe tomorrow, that day. And you just go on, and it's evening and it's finished. It happens sometimes. Sometimes the painting takes you with it.
That's wonderful. I know that you did something which is sort of not extremely well known about your work, is that you did sets for a production of Schubert's Winterreise, a theatrical production using that music. Mm-hmm. Was that a piece of music that meant something to you anyway?
I'm very fond of Schubert's music in general. And this Winterreise, they're a version of the blues from that era. It's very intriguing. And I found it like a pleasure doing this, with no budget really, making a suggestion of a winter landscape. So it was a table where I just put branches in. And later people copied that idea. Yeah, several times. So in a restaurant once, in another theater production once, and I said, wow, that was a good idea. I'm always proud when people copy something.
Did it affect your thoughts about your work more generally? Did it make you return to your work on the canvas in any way differently?
No, it was quite the opposite. Some of the singers were wearing their jackets at the front, on the back, or inside out, like I did at that time in paintings.
Yeah. So you got that from them, or did they get it from you?
No, they got it from me.
Right, okay.
Oh, but I didn't invent it myself, I saw a guy in a bar who was drunk, and he wanted to go home, and he put his vest on reversed, and said, oh, that's interesting. I have to paint something like this.
That's so intriguing, because that's a series of works.
But that's not stealing, that's things you see in life. I mean, and it is stealing, so what? That's what happens. But you have to steal in the right way. You have to bring it in another era. Do something with it, of course. In the painting, it works very differently than when a drunk man in a bar does this. Nobody looks at it. But in the painting, people look, because the painting is a sacred stage, in a way. That's how it works.
That's interesting. So you can find something that might be trivial or somehow of light meaning and imbue it with the potency that happens within the sphere of the painting. Yeah,
but it just doesn't happen for everything. I mean, you can buy a pair of scissors and make a paint, have it as a subject for a painting, but something happens sometimes,
Yeah.
And it has to do with the choice of the subject and the way the subject is represented, of course. And that's very delicate. That's the delicacy of what I'm trying to do. How does it work in a painting? Not everything works in the same way in a painting. Sometimes it's totally wrong, and there's no formula for that.
What other media influence your work?
Other media? Film. Maybe film photography, of course, yes. It's been very influential. Mm-hmm. But I think most visual artists are influenced by that subconsciously. already, because we live in a society where all images are framed, literally. I mean, in the 7th century, there was no cropping and framing. I mean, you see it on the wine etiquettes, it's vignette. It goes open to the sides. So that was another experience. Everything was from the human eye. Nature was perceived straight from the human eye. There were only reproductions of nature which were artificial, I mean handmade. So that was very different. So today we have the tendency to frame everything we see. The windscreen in a car is a frame. Paul Virilio wrote a whole book about this, the impact of that in our mind and speed. And we take pictures all the time. We look at screens all the time. We see everything within a frame. So it's interesting to stand still and think about that, I think.
Yeah. In your early works, I know that you referred to particular images from television, from Hollywood and so on.
Yeah. I was living in Brussels, and my girlfriend back then, she was like a walking film encyclopedia. And we had all Hollywood films on all the time. We know the dialogues by heart, things like that.
That's nice.
Yeah, it was funny. Sometimes we only had the sound on, just instead of music. But there is music, and there were violins. And so that created an atmosphere. And then some of the images out of these films turned out to be inspirational for parts of my drawings. Not everything, but here and there. Because she also had a lot of books about it. And then I lent these books. And that's how it goes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's a point where you started to work with live models specifically. And then at other points where it became only live models and so on. Is it now fluctuating between live models?
No, I stage everything myself now because it's just more practical and I can make much more original imagery. Otherwise, you're depending on what you accidentally see, which is a good thing because, as I said, you have to let coincidence and accidents and chance have their way in your creative process because it can make an artwork rise above yourself. Because you're always limited, but coincidence can make things happen that you could never foresee or never invent. And if you recognize it when it happens, that's part of the talent that an artist must have.
Right.
To recognize it when some interesting things happen.
One of the things we haven't really talked about is the way that there's a sort of flow between your media, if you like. Yes, painting is the kind of core work, but you still make drawings, these extraordinary drawings, and the drawings very often refer to a kind of sculptural space. But then also you've made films, so you have this kind of flow between the media. And you see painting, do you think that's almost filmic? You see drawings that look almost sculptural. You have films which are almost like paintings and so on. There's a really lovely kind of flux about the whole thing.
Yeah, and some films are really about sculptural ideas also, because I'm working on one now that you can envision or visualize a sculptural idea in a certain context, especially now with digital techniques, which is not existing, but you can make it look like it's existing. I mean, I did the same thing in the drawings, but the drawings just illustrate an idea in a drawing. But it's interesting to have it like, did he really build this? Yes, but all these things, these are the different production lines in the work, but there's, of course, always overlaps in content. I've been working on drawings for the last 20 years. I mean, not continuously, and I haven't shown them yet. So maybe I hope to find a good occasion to show these drawings because they're very interesting. But I want to keep them together, otherwise you can never make an interesting show with it. If they're spread around the world, it's hard to get them together and it's very expensive. So it's good to keep them together and maybe give them to a good museum after that, or partly, or for a reasonable price. We'll see about that. I'm soliciting now.
So curators, if you're listening, start your pitches.
Use your imagination, maybe for once. No, but I hope to do a nice traveling show with drawings one day. But the longer it takes, the more comprehensive it will get. And on sculpturing, I do for more than 10 years some sculptural experiments, but I haven't got enough to do a show with it. But it goes so slowly. But I like it because it develops in a very natural way, and that's good.
We've already talked about some rituals, but is there another particular discipline in your daily working life that you see as a ritual?
I try to introduce rituals because it helps the concentration. Not so much that I believe in the rituals, but I believe in the psychological power of performing them. But I'm too chaotic to have a system. Sometimes I try meditation, sometimes. But what helps for me is to anticipate. it's technique I developed myself, and it kind of works. It's anticipating on starting to work. You have an idea for a painting, you're enthusiastic about it, you believe in it, you think you can manage to do it, because a lot of paintings fail, or ideas fail in technical aspects. And then I said, I feel like doing it. No, I'm going to do it. No, I'm going to wait 2 more days. More anticipate, build up the anticipation until I cannot hold myself anymore. And then I work for sometimes very well.
That's really
it's
interesting.
like you build up a sort of compression, and then it has to come out until you cannot hold it anymore. And then I paint very efficient and cool. And if I try to pull it out of myself too soon, that doesn't work that well. And that might help me for my only in the morning working discipline. I have to try not to work. If I try not to work and I start to work, I don't realize that I'm working. I'm just releasing pressure, and that's always good.
I read that you sometimes talk to your brushes.
That's been a while ago. I was a bit lonely then. And I was working in that chapel. It was magical working in that chapel. It was very cold and there were no sanitary facilities. I had to pee in bottles, things like that, but that's the hard life of an artist sometimes. It's very romantic, isn't it? I just came out of a breakup and I said, no, okay, and now I'm going to be lonely and I'm going to only work. Fuck it. I really felt like doing that. And I did this for half a year or something. And my brushes were my soldiers, and I was the general. and it was like in a Disney movie in my head, And that chapel was the perfect decorum for it. I mean, above the altar, there was a large statue of the Holy Virgin reaching out her hands to me in compassion. It was so beautiful. And it helped me. But it's all in the mind, of course. but it was a special time.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, very romantic indeed.
If you could live with just one work of art, what would it be?
Probably the card player of Chardin from National Gallery, or another one. He made some nice ones too that are even more simple. Maybe another one, because I'm a bit tired of the one in National Gallery. I've seen it so many times. Talking of museums that I like to visit, each time I'm in London, I walk through National Gallery to visit a couple of paintings that I visit like old friends. Hello, how are you? Yes, that's true. And I like the whole thing about National Gallery, that you just can walk in and out. It's public. You don't need a ticket. You don't need to pay. It's very open for everybody. I think every museum should be like that. It's fantastic.
I agree. And lastly, what is art for?
I believe it serves many purposes. On the one hand, as a personal thing, as well for people who enjoy art or people who make art. It's a form of communication, and it's not literal. It's implicit. It's a form of poetry also. It's something we absolutely need. It can give consolence also, sometimes. It can give excitement. It can inspire. It's a broad variety of qualities it can have, art, but they're all necessary. So we should never underestimate art in a society. Even when you look back in hindsight to history, all civilizations that respected themselves had great art. So a society who doesn't value art is doomed.
Michaël, thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Michaël Borremans, The Monkey, is at David Zwirner in London, opening in London Gallery Weekend between the 31st of May and the 2nd of June, and then from the 6th of June to the 26th of July. Michaël Borremans, The Promise, is at Prada, Rong, Zhai in Shanghai in China until the 9th of June, and he has an exhibition at the Museum Voorlinden in Wassenaar, the Netherlands, between the 30th of November this year and the 23rd of March 2025. And that's it for this episode. Please subscribe to A Brush With wherever you're listening, and do give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. Do also subscribe to our sister podcast, The Week in Art, a deep dive into the latest big art world stories, the top shows and the key issues every week. And please subscribe to The Art Newspaper at theartnewspaper.com. We're on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Tan Audio, and on Facebook, Instagram and Threads. Production, editing and sound design on A Brush With are by David Clack, and the producer is Lewis Jebb. Thanks also to Daniela Hathaway, and a big thank you to Michaël Borremans. Thank you for listening. Bye for now. A Brush With is sponsored by Bloomberg Connects. Download Bloomberg Connects today and discover cultural institutions on demand.